live right here on Pittsburgh CW. Bob Pompeani and Gene Collier. We're keeping you company until 11 o'clock tonight. Give us a shout right here on the hotline as you see that number on your screen. Let's go out to Mike in Oakland, who kicks us off tonight. Mike, welcome to the Sports Call.
Hey, what's up, guys? How you doing?
Thanks for calling, Mike.
Hey, listen, a couple things. First, on the Penguins, I didn't get a chance to touch base with you, Bob, on that before, but, you seem to think there's no goalie controversy. Here's the thing. Murray didn't play well last year either. He had a few good games in a row, I think, like when they went on a nice stretch, but for the most part, he was not very good. In the playoffs, not made a difference. They didn't play well as a team against the Caps, I think, but he wasn't good then, and he stunk so far this year. I mean, I think there's a concern. I mean, I don't think he's looked anything like a number one goalie, and maybe it was Fleury helping him, but the two Cups aside, I just think that there's a lot of issues. Maybe it's the concussions, but I just think there is a controversy. I don't consider him right now.
I think there's a concern, if you want to use that word. Controversy means that the guy's won 2 Cups and you say put it aside. I'm not going to put it aside because he was very young when he did it. He came right in. And I think if you go back to that road trip that we saw, Mike, in Western Canada, he was outstanding in those games. And I was quite surprised that he didn't start in Vancouver.
I get it, but why? Okay, he's had 4 good games and 50.
I realize his numbers are down and Casey DeSmith is playing better and deserves to start. I don't begrudge him that. He should be starting. But I'm just saying, when it comes right down to it, I think Matt Murray is their starter, and I think eventually you'll see that happen. Now, for the sake of the team, they need that to happen. That's the guy that they've invested in and they want to be, and he did not have a good year, you're right, and he did not have a good playoffs. But it's too early for me to come to the conclusion that he's no longer your number one goaltender. But good for Casey DeSmith. He did what he had to do. Let's go to line 3. That's Waylon in Washington. Hey, Waylon, how are you?
Hi, Bob. Hi, Gene.
Hey, Waylon.
Hey, hello, Le'Veon, wherever you are. I beg your pardon, but yes. Nothing major. Just I think we should put restraints in. And Gene Scher said I'm going to walk away. And the only question I really have is. How about West Virginia Mountaineer football team? Do you think they have any kind of shot at all? That's all I got, Bob.
Gene, well, it seems like they don't get enough credit, but
yeah,
they're 7-1, and if they run the table and win the Big 12 championship, you could make the argument they should be in that playoff.
Yeah, absolutely.
At whose expense, though?
Well, I don't know. Michigan.
How about if Michigan wins the entire thing?
Well, then that's different, isn't it?
How about if Ohio State, though, beats Michigan, which they can do?
They usually do.
And Northwestern wins the Big Ten, which they might, because they're in the championship game.
They would have to beat Ohio State in that case.
Yeah, they would. Yeah, but that would create openings, because I think Notre Dame, I don't know about Notre Dame. They don't play a championship game, and I think I should hold that against them. That's the way I look at their situation.
Yeah. I mean, of the teams in the top 4, I think Notre Dame is the most suspect, that's for sure. Who's going to exit to allow somebody like West Virginia in? We're still too far down the road for that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting the way it goes. It always is. Dave in Bellevue is next. Hey, Dave, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. Hey, I'm really tired of hearing about Le'Veon Bell and all that, but I kind of have a feeling he might just show up tomorrow just to be in the media and be talked about it.
I don't. He didn't come this far to just because he wants to be talked about. He's being talked about much more than probably anyone wants to admit or hear, like we've all said here. But, I think he's come this far, and I think he's changed his mind 3 or 4 different times for whatever reasons. So I think he's now gotten to the point where he just said, that's it. And his agent misguided him a little bit there with the lack of knowledge on their franchise tag, apparently, on the 3rd year, too.
Well, yeah, obviously, but just he's changed his mind 3 times already. What's the 4th time tomorrow?
No, you're right. He might. Gene, if he does, boy, we'll be talking about it tomorrow.
We sure will be. I mean, that would not surprise me.
I want him to, by the way. I think the Steelers need him to. A luxury in sports today is to have depth at key positions because all you are 1 injury removed from having a big problem there.
If you're in December, mid-December, late December, and you have James Conner and Le'Veon Bell on your team, that's better than just having James Conner. There's nobody ever said anything to the contrary.
Yeah, but we'll see. Real quick, even though you don't want to talk about it anymore.
That's a real talk show phrase, real quick.
Real quick. Yeah, I know.
Going to steal my thunder, too?
Real quick.
Yeah.
Do you think he'll make up the money he will have? If it's $14.5 million for the whole year, which is what it's going to be.
Especially after you sit out a year.
Yeah.
No.
It's going to be hard. I agree with you. All right, let's go out to, let's see, we got line 3. Joey in Castle Shannon. Hey, Joey.
Hey,
What's
Bob,
up?
this is John.
Oh, John, how you doing, John?
Oh, how are you, sir?
Good, thanks.
You are looking as dapper as ever, and I mean, Gene, you're the man.
You're the man,
Thanks.
Gene. What's on your mind?
Well, yes, sir. Even if Bell did come back, sir, like, what do you think he would do? I really don't think he would do that much, sir.
I don't think they'd want him to, but he's there as an insurance policy. I think it would take him a few weeks to get himself even close to being ready to play, Gene. So for the first couple of weeks, you know, he would not do much. They wouldn't want to pay him much, but they're going to have to come to some agreement for a 2-week exemption. And then after that, it's just a matter of can he be in condition to help them down the stretch. Agree?
I agree, Bob, as we've said 1 million times on this show.
Stush in Menneson. Hey, Stush, you're on.
Bob, Gene.
Hey.
Hey, Bob, back to your point. Is there goalie controversy? No controversy. It's the universal rule of sports and gambling. Never mess with a streak. You go with the hot hand. There's you know, until Casey DeSmith runs into a cold streak. You know, Murray, he had a concussion. You know, look how long it took Sid to come back.
Well, they're all different. I mean, James Conner has one. From what I understand, he's doing better, and I would expect him to play in Jacksonville this week. But, you know, I think Matt Murray's also been a victim of some sloppy team play in front of him. And I think whenever you have a guy who is your starter and you rely on, sometimes you take chances you don't play nearly as soundly as you do for someone who's a backup like Casey DeSmith. I don't know if there's any merit to that, Gene, but it seems that way because that game that the last time I saw Murray gave up 5 goals, I thought he was one of their better players.
Yeah, no, we talked about it that night on the show. You know, there are a lot of Penguins that are not playing to their capabilities. Murray is one of them, but I agree with the caller. I don't see this as being, you know, the stuff of a goaltender controversy.
Dave, Jerry, and Pete, you're all coming up next. Don't go away. We have 2 lines open. Call them right now. It's 412-575-2600 right here on Pittsburgh CW, the home of the Ireland Contracting Nightly Sports Call.